Andrew, would you like me to share the screen, or would you prefer to?
Nope, I'll share my screen. I have slides prepared.
Okay, perfect.
So for those that joined us yesterday, welcome back. It's glad to see you again. I am coming in from my home in upstate New York, where we have satellite-based internet. So if a cloud goes by, the internet cuts out. So I've got my hotspot ready to go in case I freeze and I disappear. I shall return in a minute or two. But for those joining us, welcome, welcome, welcome. So this is, pull this up here. So developing public speaking skills, that is this second workshop in our 3-day series on conference skill development. And who am I to be speaking about public speaking skills? So I am a fourth-year doctoral candidate at The Ohio State University, and I have presented at a number of conferences, both local, regional, and national. But if you look at the bottom photo, you'll see something quite different from academics, and that is my non-academic primary hobby, which is clog dancing. I am a workshop instructor for clogging workshops, conventions, and festivals all around the United States. I've taught in Canada. I've taught actually once in Brisbane, Australia. So I've been all over the place. And this involves essentially getting up on stage, speaking to a crowd of people, and teaching dances, teaching routines. So that has coalesced and triangulated well with my experiences in academia to be able to talk to you today about public speaking, how best to go about it, what are some do's and don't do's, and so on and so forth. Yes, a clogging group, affinity group, Joey. Yes, yes, indeed. It would go over well, I think. And so in any event, that is why I'm speaking to you today about public speaking. Because I've done quite a bit of it in my time. So what I'd like to do first is a little interactive element. We do have an interactive activity at the end. If you saw the introductory slides, we're going to start with the introductions. We now have the presentation, and then I'll do an activity at the end. But for now, for those that have not already done so, because Yin prompted you earlier on to do this, please share your name and where you're from, your home institution, which you'd like to be called if you have a nickname of sorts, as well as providing your experience with public speaking. Have you ever done it before? Are you a complete novice? Do you have experience? This could be teaching, this could be presenting, this could be any number of things. And then finally, and this third one's optional, if you have something in particular you'd like to learn today, or a burning question you may have about public speaking, feel free to drop it in the chat. I might organically come to it during the presentation, or we could circle back and make sure we address it. So feel free to drop those in the chat now. A little oh yes, well, I have lots of commentary about in-person speaking. Roundtable session, we could talk about that. I have attended them in person. I have never presented at them. This year will be my first presenting at a roundtable session. So as those chats come in, I want to give you an overview of what we're going to be talking about in the next 50 or so minutes. A little less than that because we have the activity at the end. First of all, we're going to talk about the fundamentals of effective oral presentation, some just bird's eye view of what you should expect when you're dealing with effective oral presentations, some overall commentary on that. Then we're going to talk a little bit about voice amplification. How can you project and amplify your voice, either through electronic means such as microphones or just through your own skill? And then conveying confidence verbally. How can you command the room, as they say, with just your voice? Maintaining good body language, it's another element. Avoiding filler words, I'll talk about that momentarily. Efficiency and precision with language. And then finally, our interactive activity, which will be elevator pitches. So seeing this, the chat being populated now, Ashley from Utah, welcome. Lots of experience there. Victoria. Okay, mostly virtual. Ari, I knew you were here. Very good. And Molly, upstate Western New York. I'm from Franklin County, New York. I'm from Malone, New York. Spend a lot of time in Buffalo, Rochester. I have an aunt who lives in Victor, Canandaigua area. And Yeah. And Yuchin, I think, is that, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Yuchin,
Yep.
presented posters. Okay. So yeah, we live in a very interesting time when it comes to public speaking, because for a lot of us who, and I started in my graduate program, I have a terminal master's degree in psychology from SUNY New Paltz from 2016 to 2018. I was 2 years, yes, right next to Canandaigua. I was 2 years into my doctoral program at Ohio State when the pandemic hit. So I had the good fortune of attending a ERA in person. I have presented at conferences in person, and now that's starting to come around. A lot of folks have not had that privilege yet to present in person. And so a lot of us are used to our little Zoom boxes. And so hopefully today's talk will orient you to talking in person. So I have some sources here. And also this reminds me, I'm going to drop in the chat a link to my personal Google Drive where you can find these slides. This is a link to this PowerPoint. I have a lot of resources here. I cite some sources. I also provide some links. And I figured everyone's here who's here would obviously have an interest in it. So this will be readily available for you. If anyone can't access it, let me know. I'll fix it at the end. So first of all, the Duke University has a writing studio that you can access online. Fantastic resource when it comes to oral presentations as well as writing. And they argue that there's 3 important steps to creating an effective oral presentation: planning, practicing, and presenting, which actually follows a self-regulated learning model of before, during, and after. I would argue that taking feedback would be the after component. They don't talk about that. But planning in advance, practicing in advance, and then doing the presentation are 3 things to consider when developing an effective oral presentation. I'm not going to elaborate on those further. Throughout this presentation, we're going to be talking about those elements. It's going to be threaded throughout. And then this very interesting website that I was made aware of very recently, Toastmasters. It's actually an organization, a group of individuals who are all about public speaking, developing these skills. They have meetings, in fact, every weekly or monthly meetings, and there's local chapters. I had never heard of it, but I just found out about it a week or 2 ago, and I wanted to share it with you all. Toastmasters is the name of this group. And within the website, threaded throughout, you're going to see a lot of commentary on public speaking. And what I've understood from it, the themes I've taken away from it, are that the goals of public speaking vary depending on context. What are you trying to do when you public speak? Is it to entertain? Is it to instruct? Is it to inform? And my clogging experience certainly is entertainment, right? Trying to be snappy and fun, Mr. Funny with the jokes. I try to be funny about these things, but also I try to instruct and instruct at the same time, right? Conference presentations involve entertainment to a certain degree. It is a performance art, but also informing, right? We're informing people about what we're doing. So you have to keep those goals in mind when you come at a public speaking scenario. What is it that you're trying to do? That's something you should keep in mind. So the first real substantive piece of this is voice amplification. I want you, and the interactive activity at the end is going to involve everything we're talking about. So keep note of what we talk about. Refer to the slides that I've linked to you. If someone joined the meeting late, just let me know. I'll resend the link to these slides. But think of public speaking as performing in a play. You are acting, you are performing, but rather than portraying a character, you are conveying information. Same rules largely apply. Things like maintaining eye contact, things like similar to keeping your head raised, and I get into a little bit on the bullet points there. These all matter when performing in theater, but they also matter when presenting academic work. So we have relied on virtual settings. The first bullet point here. Can you see my mouse? Yeah. Can you see my mouse kind of hovering? Okay. So virtual settings. The last 2 years, as I've said, we have relied on the sage on the stage. Yes, indeed. We've relied on Zoom. And where Zoom falls short, where there's technical issues, for example, I could freeze in any moment. That doesn't happen in in-person settings. We do have the privilege of having our microphones available. In general, everybody can hear everybody. When you're in a physical space, the acoustics start to matter. What is the room like? Is it a giant room? Is it a small room? Is the room carpeted or not? That's something no one thinks of. It actually affects the echo of the room. So it's very, very important. If you get the opportunity, go to the room that you're speaking at, and let's focus on AERA as a context, assuming whether or not you're presenting in person this year. You may someday present in person, so I'm going to keep that as our lens going forward. But see what the room is like. Where are you doing this? And seeing what happens when, if you speak too loudly, does it just echo off the walls and makes it garbled? What is the proper technique here? What's the optimal volume? That's stuff you can look at in advance. That gets to the preparing part of this. That gets to the practicing part of this. Sometimes microphones will be present. Some microphones will be available in the room. And if they are, use them. It's the metaphor I give is like, if anyone golfs in here, I was always told, if you get the opportunity to tee up a shot, you always use a tee. Why not use a tee? And so this is what I would say to you. If you have a microphone in the room, use it. It will only make life easier on you unless the batteries are dead in it, which they should be able to replace. But there's something called, and this is sort of a crude term, but it's called swallowing the mic. It quite literally means that if you're holding, I'm going to use this as an example, you're holding a microphone, you hold it right up to your chin, which is not great in the land of COVID where we have to sanitize everything, but bear with me. You hold it right up to you. It will amplify your voice tremendously. You hold the microphone out here, it does you no good at all. You're just kind of waving it around. So if you have a microphone, the way to amplify your voice best is to really swallow that microphone, hold it right up to you. That is one other pro tip. So if you have a microphone, use it. And if you do have one and you do use it properly. That will help you amplify your voice. I talked about room size. I talked more about echoes, but if you have a large room, you obviously can't whisper. I had a professor in my undergrad program who taught intro psych. He taught for about 150 people in a big room, and the man could barely amplify his voice at all. He had a little boxed microphone that didn't work at all, and he basically just talked like this to everyone in the room. We're going to talk about Freud and psychoanalysis. It was terrible. Love the man, it was terrible. And no one could hear anything. And if you had to sit in the first two rows to hear anything. So don't make your audience work for it. Try to be as loud as you need to be so everybody can hear you. And relevant to that is audience configuration. Are they near you? Are they far away? Are you in a round table situation? You brought up round tables. You don't necessarily have to amplify as much when you're all surrounded by a table. Or you're all surrounding a table, rather. But in roundtable sessions, and then you asked about roundtable sessions, in a traditional year, and I don't know how it worked during the pandemic, but during a traditional year, there's several tables in one room, and everybody's talking all at once. It's a giant din of noise. So you really have to amplify, but also be closer to people and make it very, try to command your space. Because if you are too far away, your voice gets lost in the crowd. Forget it. You're not going to be heard well. So really be deliberate in how close you are to people. Keep head raised. This is a very minor point, but essentially, if you're like this, if you're kind of looking down at yourself or looking at your slides or something, you're constricting your vocal cords and therefore not able to amplify as much as if you just keep your head up and amplify out. That's Theater 101. Keep your head up, and that really will help you deliver your message. I have Jimmy Cannon, public speaking coach, one of many. I don't necessarily endorse him in particular, but he is an example of a series of vocal exercises, of a series of videos on YouTube that you can follow along with. There's exercises, there's things, some of it's singing related, you don't have to worry about that, but some of it's public speaking related. And that's something that you can look at and follow and try to do. And the point being that vocal exercises, practicing speaking, can prevent you from getting hoarse almost immediately. It helps you develop that proficiency, efficiency, and stamina. to project and to project for a long time. And hey, we're all getting ready for our eventual keynote addresses, right? We speak for 45 minutes, right? We talk for endless minutes. We have to be the person, right? So that's a way to do it. Again, drop any questions for me in the chat. I'm just I get on a roll here, and I just sort of steamroll through this stuff. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them, and I'll address them as we go. If I'm not going to address them later. But does that all make sense? That's voice amplification. That's making your voice heard, right? So the next bit, and this is more steeped in literature, and I have references at the end, but how to convey confidence verbally. And so the argument here is that communication, presenting at something, is a two-way process involving the mutual exchange of information, where you are presenting to an audience and they are giving information back to you. And I'm not just talking about questions. I'm not just talking about verbal information. I'm talking about, are they maintaining your eye contact? Are they engaged in what you are saying? Are they not? Any of those things? Are they not listening to you? Are they looking at their phones? And this is especially relevant when teaching undergrads, which is something I've done for the last 4.5 years. It's something I've done quite a bit. It's very apparent when people are not interested in what you're talking about. And so trying to convey confidence both in your physical demeanor as well as your voice is critical. Because if someone's not watching you, your body language doesn't matter anymore. And I'll talk about body language, it's important. But if people have already stopped, watching you and listening to you or paying attention to you, it's your voice that must carry the day. And this is actually really relevant online. If you present virtually, there are a limitless number of other tabs people can have open, and we all do it. Don't pretend you don't do it. Everybody does it. We all have our whatever other stuff up. You may have it up right now, and that's fine. I'm trying to convey confidence verbally, so you still hear me. You still are, knowing what's going on, right? So, oh boy, again, Mr. Funny with the jokes, right? So anyway, that's important. Active listening in response to questions. If participants give you that information verbally, they ask you a question. Really listening to what they're asking you is a sign of confidence. It means that you are not just, oh, thank God, thank goodness, it's over. The presentation's over, get me off, get me out of here. No, if you are really intent on listening to them, even though you're kind of exhausted and you're all pretty much ready for it to be over, if you're listening to them intently, you appear more confident yourself. That's something really interesting that I didn't know. That if you are looking to be confident in your presentation, really taking the feedback or criticism or commentary or questions headlong and really paying attention to it actually helps that. Practicing, I think I've said that, practicing in advance, basically the benefit of practicing prevents the verbal stumbles. It prevents the use of filler words, which I'll talk about in a minute, and subsequently increases confidence in what you're doing. Vocal variability, this is a Toastmasters original. They love this. Vocal variability is what I just did with you about 1.5 minutes ago. Raising your voice, being not monotone, right? I go up when I'm talking about something interesting or something that I want you to know about, or I will go down if there's some other point I'm trying to make. It's this up and down of the intonation of your voice. You will know when someone does not have this because they are monotone. They are sort of just this, and I just broke one of my rules. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But it's this flat delivery. It's a very flat delivery. It's not very compelling. It's a skill you can develop. And once you've developed, it is in your best interest to use it. Being flexible and having variety in the way you are delivering your message. And if it seems like I've been stumbling a little bit, I've been trying the best I can to be up and down in talking about it. So that is the variability element, vocal variability. And then lastly, one thing you should keep in mind is that a lack of confidence when presenting publicly may also be due to literal stage fright. And so I have a YouTube video I'm not going to show you now, but you can follow it. And it essentially gets into how to combat stage fright. So again, I'm maintaining this theater analogy where presenting, public speaking, presenting at conferences equates to theatrical production. And so it could be stage fright that is affecting you, that you're nervous, I'm anxious, I don't want to be up in front of people and performing, for lack of a better word. So finding methods for reducing stage fright is actually a really effective method. And for those of you who are fond of theater, and if you've heard the old, old and dusty advice to, picture the audience in their underwear, you've heard about that. That is not this. Don't do that. That is not this. There are better things to do than that. Okay, I'm just saying. All right, very good. Okay. Again, and for those who just joined us, welcome. Thank you for dropping slides in the chat. I think, Joey, you've been doing that. Thank you. And for those, if you have questions, drop them in the chat. I will get to them, if not now, eventually. Why is the, why what, actually? I'll take that question. What are you asking? Dati, is that how I pronounce that?
Yes, the last example that you gave, why it is not helpful for us to put the example of our audience in front of us. Why?
Oh, that. Oh, I see. Well, essentially, it equates to test. So I appreciate that. So it equates to test anxiety literature, where once you are in a position of panic, doing things like that, it's less effective. It's more effective to prepare in advance to reduce the overall level of anxiety you face when performing, as well as test anxiety in any other scenario like that. Once you're in it, it may work for some, but again, that video doesn't get into that sort of stuff, because that's a joke, I guess, among the theatrical community. But the idea is preparing in advance of the talk is more effective than knee-jerk methods in the midst of the presentation. Although certainly it's not for nothing that if you're in the scenario and you get anxious, you do have to have some methods. So I guess I will walk it back a little bit, whatever works for you if you're presenting, but that's kind of what I was getting at. Does that make sense? Okay. So I talk about good body language here. Good body language. Essentially, what I mean by good is what conveys confidence and what does not. What is effective body language and what is not. And so nonverbal cues convey as much information about our confidence levels, even possibly more so than our vocal ability, but it is in tandem with it. Essentially, I can have a very vibrant, very compelling vocal delivery in a virtual space. If my camera's off, that's pretty much all I need. But if my camera is on, or if I'm physically in a place, that's not the whole story. So maintaining eye contact, keeping head raised, not only conveys confidence, but again, the vocal cord issue, it actually elongates your vocal cords, allows for better delivery. Never turn your back on the audience. So I think you all should be familiar with the common feedback you might get from a professor saying, don't read off the slides. Does that make sense? Don't read off the slides. You've heard that. Often what is accompanying that feedback is not only standing in front of a podium where you're essentially facing an audience and you're reading. So essentially, if I'm looking at my slides and not the camera, I'm reading right off the slides. Right away, you can tell I'm not confident in what I'm doing. But even more so if you're not in front of the podium. Say you took the gamble to come out from the podium and you're in front of a screen in an in-person setting, you have to turn around and read off the slides. If you're going to do that, you're going to read off the slides. You've now turned your back on people, right? And if you're not looking at them, they surely aren't looking at you. And that is something that is brief, but could potentially be devastating for someone's overall confidence in their delivery and the overall impression that you give audience members. Again, this is a Toastmasters thing, so the link is in the earlier slide. There is, I don't know if this is based on research or if this is just their inclination, so keep that in mind. But I have heard that in the first 10 to 12 seconds of a presentation, the average engagement level is determined. That basically within 10 to 12 seconds of someone starting to present, the overall level of engagement is essentially sorted out. That engagement may be low, that engagement may be high, but essentially it is determined almost immediately. And if the presentation, essentially, if the presentation goes on for 3 hours, like most weekly, grad school classes, that sort of messes with the formula a little bit because people get fatigued. But in a 10 to 12 minute conference presentation, for example, it is truly the first 10 to 12 seconds that will ultimately determine the overall engagement for your talk. So all of this stuff helps to keep that interest, to really compel people from the very start. Okay. Power posing. I brought this in because that's what I teach my undergraduates. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but this is exactly the same material I present to my undergraduates, as evidenced by the animations that I forgot to take out because I haven't had animations in my other slides. But this is what I show my undergraduates, where you can have depowered body language or empowered body language. And this applies to presentation. I may show you the next slide, actually, to be more relevant to more presentation stuff here. You have, I will talk about that at the end, Yen. I absolutely will. You have these three images where the person on the left, so the woman on the left has this power pose, right? She's conveying confidence, as is the woman on the left in the middle image. And then you have President Obama conveying image. He's got his feet up, right? He's conveying confidence. So these are poses. I'm not necessarily saying you stand like a superhero in front of your crowd, your audience at the conference. But what I am saying is, if your shoulders are hunched, in general, if you're deeply uncomfortable to be there and everybody knows you're deeply uncomfortable being there, you're not going to convey much confidence in your body language. So that is something to keep in mind. Is everybody good so far? I'm almost through talking. We can get to the activity here in a minute. Okay. There we go. We're back to my new slides. So avoiding filler words, I'm gonna give you technical jargon that you never knew you wanted, but you're going to get it anyway. The ums and ahs. So I am certain you've all heard this. Right? That happens all the time, right? You are literally thinking verbally. That is, you're thinking verbally, is what that's called. Also, technical term, disfluencies, if you never knew that was a thing. Disfluencies, where you are vocalizing nothing. You're vocalizing nothing. That's a disfluency, also commonly referred to as filler words. In general, if you were taking a public speaking class, every one of those disfluencies would be a point off of your score. No one's scoring you at AERA, but essentially the less you do that, the more in command of the room you be, the more effective your public speaking will be. The faster you talk, the harder that becomes. So slowing down, I'm skipping a slide, but slowing down, I'm skipping a bullet point rather, slowing down prevents that garbled and fumbled speech. If you slow down, you are less likely to have those issues. And going up one bullet, deliberate pauses. There is a common misconception that not saying anything is indicative of not knowing what you're talking about, having no clue. Just, oh, well, this person doesn't know what they're talking about. There's silence, crickets. But no, not so. It is actually far more effective to deliberately pause for maybe 5 or 6 seconds. I'm not saying a minute of pause of nothing, but give it a few seconds to gather your thoughts and then speak eloquently and then speak with a little more efficiency and precision, not to foreshadow the next slide. But if you go, a lot of people think that that's better than not saying anything. At least I'm making sound. Well, no, that is not true. If you pause and you slow yourself down and you try to eliminate or at least reduce these filler words, you are delivering a much more effective presentation. Does that make sense? Okay, very good. Okay, now I think, is this it? Yeah. All right, so this is the last bit of info, and then we're gonna get into the activity because I've talked enough. Efficiency and precision with language is something that folks don't necessarily think of when thinking about public speaking, but it's so important. Being efficient and avoiding vague or abstract wordage is really effective when public speaking. I'll give you 2 examples here, both of which I have violated in this one talk. But, oh well. I was given some lovely advice by a professor that I worked with in my master's program, Dr. Allison Nash, who worked for IBM and then taught psychological statistics at SUNY New Paltz in the Catskills of New York State. And this was her sage advice that I never forgot. Try to avoid the use of the word thing in professional speech. Essentially, there is always a better word than the word thing, because thing is describing something, right? There's always a better word, always a more precise word than the word thing. So as best as you can, and no one's perfect, and like I said, I've already done it in the last half hour, avoid using the word thing when giving a professional talk. And then, and this is becoming increasingly common, we hedge ourselves. We hedge and qualify everything we say, especially in the ed psych literature, in the ed psych world, which is where I live. And I think a lot of you do as well. We don't want to be definitive in what we say because it all depends, right? Psychology, everything depends. And so this stuff creeps in, sort of and kind of. People creep that in to their spoken words. Oh, we sort of did this, or we kind of did this. And what drives me nuts is if you really think about it, if you really listen to what people are saying, it makes no sense. Because someone will say something to the effect of, well, we sort of surveyed students and got their information on, and that's an exaggerated example, but still, we sort of analyzed the data in this way. And no, you either did or you didn't do that, right? There's no sort of, you did survey them, you did analyze it this way. That's it. You either did it or you didn't do it. So I would recommend trying to get rid of that completely. Try to get rid of this sort of kind of language. Even though we love qualifying everything we say, because heaven forbid someone criticize us because we're too definitive and we're too absolutist in our language. But I think it's better to be absolutist than to hedge everything. So I think sort of and kind of should be banished from professional speech. That's just my 2 cents worth. There's no citation there. That's just my commentary. Okay. But anyway. And also, efficiency in speech reduces the time spent presenting. We have precious few minutes to convey our material, and I think all of us have felt that pain of trying to cut our presentations down. It's almost never the case that we don't have enough time. It's always we go too long. We're always trying to shave off those minutes. So if you're efficient and precise in the way you present and the way you speak, you effectively reduce the amount of time you spend talking. You're not going to ramble. You're not going to go on rabbit holes or tangents. If you are precise in what you want to say, and certainly practice and know your content, you are much less likely to chew up precious seconds or minutes going down those rabbit holes, right? And that's something that I struggle with because I tend to over elaborate. I tend to go down rabbit holes, and I'm keeping an eye on the clock because I know I want to be done in 5 minutes, and I will be done in 5 minutes. But that's something that is pretty pervasive. So in any event, I know I have questions in the chat. I'll get to those in a minute. So everything making sense so far? Everybody gets it? Yeah? All right. Okay, so elevator pitches, which will be our activity. And then I have a source on mindtools.com that talks about this. You've probably heard of this. Elevator pitches are these short, microscopic summaries of whatever. I say whatever because you can have a pitch about anything. You can have an elevator pitch about your current project. You could have a pitch. Oh, well, I don't know why that happened. You can have a pitch about your overall interest. If you're a doctoral student, your dissertation interest, your master's thesis, you could have an elevator pitch about topics of the day or something that you're trying to convey to a person you're speaking with. They must be articulated well. They must exude confidence. They essentially, and I'm not going to read all that word for word, they essentially have to encapsulate everything that I've talked about. An elevator pitch should have all of the elements from which we've already addressed today. And if done well, an elevator pitch is a 2-minute or so, 2-minute glimpse into your thinking and into your theorizing, and is so impressive. People struggle with this because you try to get people to give me your elevator pitch, and people struggle. They take too long. And this is so relevant in poster sessions. This is a very, very relevant concept in poster sessions, because you get people's attention for mere seconds. They're walking by. They're looking at your poster. More often than not, people put too much text on posters. They don't want to look at that. So they look at you and tell me what the poster says. You got 2 minutes. So that is something that I would like us to try to practice. That'll be the interactive activity. Essentially, in 2 minutes, can you summarize a topic of your choosing? And can you convey that effectively? Can you convey it with confidence, confidence, articulation, efficiency, and precision? So we have an interactive activity here, and I'm going to go into the interactive activity because we've got the flow going, and I'm going to come back, and I have comments here from folks that I will address before we're done. So I'm going to divide you all into 5 breakout rooms. There'll be 2 people per room. You will be in pairs, and that includes Yin and Corey and Joe. All of you guys are going to be in this, and to your partner. Try, and then you have a moment here. I'm rambling on purpose to give you some time to think. 2 minutes of a topic of your choosing. Ideally, something you might be presenting at AERA. If you're not presenting at AERA, maybe some other conference, or something that you actually have to present to somebody. 2 minutes. And the other person should be actively listening to you. They should really be listening to what you have to say. And then the partner will give feedback to you. How did it go? Were they compelling? What was going on? What are some things they could work on? And then you reverse roles. And I will give us 8 minutes, maybe 10 minutes or so, see how it goes, for you to do that. So in theory, 4 minutes for the presentations and another 2 or 3 minutes for feedback and such. So that should be more than enough time to do this. And then we'll come back as a large group and we'll see how it went, if that makes sense. Is everybody good with that? All right, so I got 5 breakout rooms that I'm assigning randomly. And so, did we drop somebody? Somebody, it should have worked. 2, 2, 2, 2. There's 9. Oh, Yin, it didn't assign you because I think you're a co-host. So Yin, can you join room 5 so Ashley's not by herself? All right, so I'm gonna open all these. I'm gonna open all these up because we're hosts. It didn't assign us to rooms. Let's Yin, you want to start the recording? There it is. All right. How did that go? So do we have some large group commentary and feedback? Joe, yes. Joey says good. So was that not interesting, right? You're compressing everything into about 2 minutes. Was Molly's elevator pitch was good or great. Yes, great. Fantastic. So, and hopefully you were able to give feedback to and receive feedback from your partners in this space. And it just gives you things to think about, right? It just gives you things to think about. Those were my slides. The slides are over. And I want to go to the chat now. And I'm going to start with what I saw first, which was Yin's question about what would be your tips if you lose people or feel like you're losing attention. Essentially, the vocal variability hey, that is it's sort of a dirty little trick, but it's the kind of thing to make people go, what's happening? And once and it's fleeting, right? It's moments. They look up at you and they're looking at you, then you can keep them by keeping eye contact. It's very uncomfortable for people, you'll find, to break eye contact with you once you've established it with them. Once they know you're looking at them, it's quite uncomfortable actually for people to look at their phones or whatever. If you're never looking at them, then there's this shroud of invisibility, a Harry Potter like cloak of invisibility situation where people just like, oh, well, They don't see me. I can do whatever I want. So that's how I would, that's one thing I would do. I would also consider, I mean, there's some, at some point, don't stress over one or two people, right? You're not going to get everybody all the time. So don't panic yourself if one person checked out. But I would pay attention if the majority are checked out. I would consider something's going on. And you may have to just revise your content and come back another day. This is for teaching classes if you get weekly or biweekly chances to do it. At conference presentations, you'd hope that little intonation of your voice, a little element, something to compel people to look at you will carry the day through. You tend to look away. So look elsewhere. You know what I would recommend? Look elsewhere over people's heads. It's a clever theatrical trick where if you look at the back of the room, people know that you're not looking at them, but they don't know if you're looking at somebody else. So if I'm looking like, you know, I know there's nobody up there, right? They know too, there's nobody up there. If I look right here, if I'm like, well, okay, I'm in the camera. If I look over the camera, I'm just looking off, and I could be looking at somebody, you don't, and they don't know. So that's someplace I would look. That's someplace that I would do that. Okay. Jody, do you have any tips for this situation? Finish the presentation sooner because of skipping details and just remembered at the end of the presentation. That's fantastic. So in that scenario, okay, you've missed something. Oh, thank you. So in a scenario in which, okay, there's a distinction to be made. If you've skipped material on purpose because you thought you were going to run over, certainly you're justified to go back to them. If you missed details because you simply forgot to talk about them, it depends on how important the details are. I would argue the more important they are, the less likely you are to have that happen. But if for some reason it's some minor detail that's not terribly relevant, you just didn't get to it, you could say, as revisiting something, if you have some in your head, some sort of smooth transition for that, but more often than not, you probably wouldn't. So I'd say just roll with it. Just go to questions and answers, take more questions, perhaps take the opportunity if no one has questions, maybe you can say, revisit a detail or two and use that as your opening, but certainly don't say, oh, I forgot this detail, I'm going to go back and mention it because I forgot it. No one needs to know that. You can keep that to yourself and keep that composure, and no one will know the difference. It's in the dancing world. We always say if you screw up a step, the cardinal rule when dancing publicly is to never stop dancing, because no one knows. If you stop dancing, everyone will know. But if you don't, you just keep dancing. No one, just keep swimming. Right, the Dory thing. It's true. Okay, got that one. Okay, we did that one. Okay, so I think is that it? I think that's all the questions in the chat. Does anyone have any other questions for me or for the group about public speaking?
I have one question.
Yes.
What if you got a question and you have no idea how to answer that?
Beautiful. That is a beautiful question. And the three most underappreciated words in public speaking, I don't know. It is genuine, it is sincere, and no one will criticize you unless if it's something that you have presented on that you've already conveyed. That would be the only scenario I can fathom. If somebody's asking you about an extension of your research, something like that, there are ways to word I don't know without saying I don't know. You can say that's an excellent question. We can look at it for future research. That's an intriguing point. You can glaze over it. But I actually just gave a presentation on Friday at a on-campus forum at Ohio State. Someone asked me a question about, and it was a large data set we were analyzing, and it asked me a specific variable. Did you have this variable? I didn't know. And I said, I have a very succinct response. I don't know, but I'll go find out. I'll let you know if you care enough. They most often don't. I didn't say that, but I don't know. And that's fine. That is fine to not know. And I actually got first place at that. It was adjudicated, and I got first place when I presented. So I won the thing. And I said I don't know in the question and answer period. So I would say being confident in saying I don't know is leaps and bounds better than stumbling and fumbling for some nonsensical answer that's probably not even true. It is so much better to just say, I don't know. It's genuine, it's succinct, it saves time, and you come off looking like a gem because you're honest with people. It's just, I think that's my approach. Anyway, Ashley, your hand's up, but you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question, not necessarily for like presenting, but if you're having like an interview or podcast or a conversation with someone, I find it really challenging to not, like if someone asks you a question, to not say either that's a good question or okay, so, or something like that in response. Like I find it really challenging to just answer the question without, yeah, I don't know, saying like, yeah, so, and then answering. Do you have any advice for that?
I'd say that's not a problem.
Really?
Saying something to the effect of, well, that's a great question, thank you. Or, okay, so that's you taking a moment to compose yourself. It almost feels abrupt if you don't have anything prepared for that.
Sure.
Again, filler words or disfluencies are vocalizations that can have no meaning, that convey nothing. Saying that's a great question has meaning. Saying, all right, so you're preceding what you're about to say.
Sure.
You're teeing it up. There is a purpose for that. So I would call that not a problem. I would say if your go-to is then your answer is say nothing. That is, then silence is golden. That is so much better than that. But if you are relying on that as a mechanism, then and I think a little variability, maybe think of a couple of alternatives. You don't want that over repetition of a phrase, because then it looks mechanical. It looks like you can't think of anything else to say. But I would call that not a problem, actually.
No, fair enough. Thanks.
Emmanuel.
Yes, Andy. My challenge is that, I mean, saying I don't know outright, would it not affect your image or credibility? And then secondly, is it also okay to throw it back to the audience? For instance, it happens quite a lot in maybe lecture theaters where you ask a professor a very difficult question, and then he or she will ask you, what do you think? So is it also appropriate to maybe ask any member of the audience? I mean, does anybody have any idea as to the question being asked, or what are their opinion? Just to be buy time and then maybe recollect some information and then be able to, I mean, provide the necessary answer to the question.
Right. I would say it's context dependent. If you are in a scenario where you are the speaker and there's an audience there, I'm going to use a piece of advice I don't often give because I don't particularly like it, but it's read the room. You got to read the room. If you have a room full of folks who have been chatting and who seem engaged, I think that's a strategy that one can employ. I would not say never do that. But if you are in a room where no one else is speaking, you are the person, like for roundtable sessions, that would be for sure a way I would go. It's more of a collaborative discussion. But when you are the speaker and you're asked a question, unless there's people in the room that you are confident could give a better answer than you, and that's being crafty, that's knowing the room, then, you bet, thank you for being here. Then I would say you could do that. But if you don't have a clue, maybe not rely on that. For the credibility issue, it depends on what the question is, but I would dare say those in glass houses should not throw stones. I would say no one should be asking you a question in which you don't quite know the answer. Oh, that person, look at that fool, that fool, they don't know what they're talking about. I would be very surprised if that's someone's reaction. And if it is, you weren't going to impress them anyway. It wasn't going to, that's what if somebody's inclined to be that way. So I think it's, especially from a public speaking standpoint, much better to have an honest and genuine and swift response than to stumble or to try to come up with some, because what's the alternative? If you don't know the answer, you don't know the answer. Don't make something up. I would not recommend that. But Corey, I'm going to do what academics do and answer your question by asking a question. Yeah, that's, I mean, it's a strategy, right? There are moments when it's appropriate. It may go over like a lead balloon. You got to, again, read the room, know who's in front of you. But I have often, if I'm presenting and my advisor's in the room, I will defer a question to someone who I know will know the answer. I can say, my advisor's right here. She would know better. Dr. Yu, do you have an opinion on this? And that is actually quite crafty. That is something that you could employ. That's good. Yeah, right. I don't know, but I'm excited to look into that as a future direction. That is great. That is the glazing I just talked about, right? That is a way to say, in that case, you literally said, I don't know, but there's ways to not say I don't know and glaze over it if you are uncomfortable saying I don't know. And I have never been. I have never been uncomfortable to say, you know what, I don't know the answer to that, but I am willing to look. That's the thing too. Don't let it sit. That's what Yin just conveyed. You don't just say, I don't know, and I will never know, and we will never know, and great question. Like, no, you just keep, you're making an effort to be like, I don't know the answer to that, but I surely can look into it. And so, for example, we had a project where I presented and somebody asked a question. We had a survey measure of students in feelings of individualization in recitation section in physics. And we were looking at that in relation to their TAs, their graduate student TAs. We did not have the gender identity of their graduate student TAs, and therefore did not have the calibration of the student's gender identity with the TA's gender identity. We didn't have that. Could we get that? Maybe. Certainly worth investigation, but I didn't know. So I just said, you know what? I don't know the impact of that. We didn't look into that, but that's something that we can look at in the future. I know we're 5 minutes over, but the questions have been fabulous, and probably should wrap it up given that people have things to do. But thank you so much for your time and attention. It was a lot of fun talking to you all.
Thank you all so much for being here. Before we go, I just want to advertise that on Monday, we will have our March Motivation Monday on peer reviewing research. We have wonderful panelists, Dr. Lisa Lindenbrick Garcia, Dr. Emily Rosenzweig, and Dr. Carrie Roseth to discuss their strategies and approaches for peer reviewing. So if you're interested in that, I can shoot you the link. Otherwise, have a wonderful day. We hope to see you tomorrow.
Yes, we have our finals workshop tomorrow at 4, same time, same Zoom link, and it is here networking, informal and formal networking opportunities. So hopefully you'll join us again tomorrow. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Len. Thank you, Yin.